Under the hush of stadium lights after the last whistle and confetti of October leaves, the quarterback found me by the tunnel, touched my cheek, and kissed me. That night, love ran a play braver than any audible, and the whole town finally exhaled. I didn't run. I belonged there. If this story warms you, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share. More caring, courageous love awaits here weekly. The first thing I want you to know is that we were adults, two grown men who had already learned a thing or two about compromise and courage, who paid our bills, who remembered to call our mothers and change the oil on time. The second thing I want you to know is that the kiss didn't happen in the shadows. It happened under the tall lights on a cool Midwestern night, with the brass of the marching band echoing off the bleachers and the smell of grass thick in the air. When he kissed me, it wasn't a secret. It was a statement. My name is Daniel Reyes, and at the time I was 24 years old, a graduate assistant in athletics communications at Hawthorne College, tucked into a river town where barges floated slow and patient under iron bridges. My job was statistics and stories, tracking completion percentages, writing post-game recaps, snapping a photo when a moment meant more than a number. I loved the rhythm of it, the thud of cleats on concrete, the whistle's quick silver slice through air, the way parents in folding chairs sat a little straighter when their kids took the field. I loved that football, for all its noise. Has a heartbeat steady as a drum line. And then there was him. Caleb Archer, senior quarterback, 22, blue eyes not like winter ice, but like the streak of sky that appears between storms. He smiled to one side, the way someone smiles when they're holding a joke in their pocket just for you. He was tall in a way that made shadows stretch differently around him, broad-shouldered, yes, but easy in his body, as if he'd learned early to be gentle with the power he carried. He could read defenses like some folks read the morning paper, and he could tie a tie without looking. He volunteered at the Children's Hospital on Thursday afternoons and always stopped to sign programs, even when the bus was idling. We met months before the kiss, in the fluorescent light of media day, where I was sorting lanyards and figuring out whether the coffee was strong enough for the reporters who had strong opinions. Caleb came early, hair damp from a quick shower, hands clean, and asked if I needed help setting up the banners. He didn't have to ask. Star quarterbacks don't usually roll up their sleeves for gaffer's tape and extension cords. But he did like it was the most natural thing. We aligned the Hawthorne Hawks backdrop together, and as we pressed out the creases, he asked me about my camera. He said he used to mess around with an old film Pentax his grandfather gave him. I told him my grandfather used to write letters in pencil so soft you had to squint to read the love in them. It was that kind of conversation, easy and crackling with stray electricity I tried not to name. I couldn't afford to be careless. I worked with the team. I wrote about them, traveled with them, stood on the sidelines with a headset that buzzed with codes. An athletic department runs on trust, and I kept mine polished like the good cufflinks I wore when our alumni donors visited. I came out in college, and I was lucky. No dramatic storms, no slammed doors. But I had learned that even quietly brave lives require careful choices. The season started. September shrugged bright and warm, and we won 2 games by margins that made even the old-timers at the diner nod. Caleb's passes spiraled like the definition of hope, and I typed his yardage so many times I could have written it with my eyes closed. On the bus rides home, I worked by the light of my tablet, listening to the comforting talk of linemen and linebackers, the low rumble and the sudden bursts of laughter. I never sat near Caleb, not at first. But our paths crossed in hallways, and hallways are funny places. You learn the rhythm of someone's footfall. I learned his. One late afternoon, after a walk-through practice that painted the sky the color of persimmons, he came into the media room with a box of old programs he'd found in a closet. "Thought you might want to do something with these," he said, setting them down like he was setting down a memory. I thanked him, and in the quiet that followed, he pointed to a program from 1987. "My mom says she took me to my first Hawthorne game when I was 4, he said, smiling at a faded photograph. "My first word might have been ball, not a bad first word. What was your second?" I asked. "Probably again," he said, laughing softly. "That's how it goes, right? Once you love something, you want it again." I looked at the photograph. at players whose names hung in our stadium hallway on plaques. Sometimes the hard part is knowing when to keep asking for again and when to try a new word, I said. He watched me like he was adding that line to a quiet notebook he kept inside. "What's your word right now?" he asked. "Steady," I said. "I like steady. It feels like home." He nodded. "Steady's not a bad way to win a game," he said, and then he went because someone called his name from the hallway. He looked back once. It was a small gesture, but I felt it. We built a routine as October drifted in, carrying wood smoke and sweaters. He'd wave to me in the mornings when he passed the communications office on his way to the training room. On Thursdays, if I stayed late, I'd see him coming from the volunteer shift, a paper armband still snug around his wrist. He told me once, over coffee in the campus cafe, where the muffins were too sweet and the chairs too squeaky, that he liked the quiet of those afternoons with the kids. "They ask better questions than reporters," he said. "Like, what do you do when you miss?" And they accept a real answer. "What do you do?" I asked, stirring my coffee. "I tell them there's better and there's next. And both matter," he said. That same day, I told him that my abuela used to say, "Mijo. Even the train that's late still reaches the station." He laughed and scribbled it on a napkin. His handwriting was a little shy, a little careful, like he wrote letters he meant to keep. I wanted to be that napkin tucked into his wallet, a soft thing he could pull out and smile at. We never stepped over a line, not then. People like to imagine that love is an immediate blaze, but often it's a series of small warmths, a shared joke, a held door, the way someone remembers you take your chili with extra onions. I learned that he used to watch the weather radar like it was art. He learned that I call my mother every Sunday after lunch, the way we did when I was a kid and Dad was a mail carrier and Sunday was the only day he didn't bring the town its letters. There were moments, though, moments that breathed deeper. After a road game 2 hours away, the bus pulled into campus past midnight. I stayed late logging stats. When I finally left, the parking lot was quiet, a film of frost starting to claim the windshields. Caleb was there tying a ragged scarf around his neck, his breath making ghosts in the cold. "You need a ride?" he asked. "I'm good," I said, then realized my car door was stuck. He watched me tug, a comedy of stubbornness, and then he stepped close. The smell of wintergreen and laundry soap and cut grass was him. "May I?" he asked. I stepped back. He braced his hands on the frame, counted under his breath, tugged steady. It popped open. "The trick is patience," he said, grinning. "And never yank too hard." He paused. "That works for most things." I managed not to blush. "Thanks," I said. "For the car door. And the life advice." He nodded. Then his fingers brushed my sleeve, a piece of lint, and in that gentlest motion was a whole unspoken chapter. He didn't linger. He waved, and I watched him walk away, tall and sure, and somehow careful not to scuff the frost with his steps. If you were listening then, you would have said, "Daniel, he was interested." He was offering you chances to say what you needed to say. And you wouldn't be wrong. But sometimes, even when the signs are clear, your heart wants one more. Sometimes you want the unmistakable, the moment that feels like sunlight breaking through after a long stretch of gray. The fear wasn't fear of him. It was fear of asking too much of a small town and a beloved quarterback and a quiet life I had made steady. It was fear, too, that I wouldn't be enough for the bravery it would require. The game was homecoming. You know the kind? Grandparents in Letterman jackets from a half-century ago, babies with tiny foam fingers chewing the edges, alumni trying to pretend their knees didn't hurt when they stood to cheer. The leaves were a gold so bright it felt borrowed. We were playing Bridgeport, a rival with fast receivers and a reputation for talking. I'd written the preview the night before, understated and respectful, the way we do in our department. But my heart, if it had published its own preview, would have written something like, "Please let everyone come home safe. Please let the boys have fun. Please let the good ones feel seen. Game day is a ritual." I arrived early, pressed my slate gray suit jacket, set out the roster sheets, checked the batteries on my camera. The band rehearsed on the track, their notes spreading like butter over toast. The cheer team stretched under the scoreboard. Parents gathered in clusters, some wearing thermoses like medals. I saw Caleb on the field, headphones on, eyes scanning the routes he knew by heart. He lifted a hand when he saw me on the sideline. Just a touch of acknowledgement, enough to say, "I see you." Kickoff was crisp. The ball arced into the morning, and 30,000 small decisions began to unfurl. I tracked them in real time. Down and distance, yards after catch, quarterback hurries. Caleb played smooth, a metronome. He used his feet. When the pocket collapsed, reset his shoulders when a safety crept too close. You could see leadership in the slope of his hands in the huddle. You could see kindness in the way he helped a Bridgeport defender to his feet after they collided. Bridgeport played well. They matched us, score for score, and by the fourth quarter, the air sharpened with that specific electricity of a game inching toward its last breath. With 2 minutes left, we were down by 4. I could feel the crowd hold itself in one collective inhale. Coach clapped his hands gentle, not frantic, because frantic makes people miss. "Let's be who we are," I heard him say. "Let's be steady." Caleb trotted onto the field, the kind of trot that means business, but not panic. He looked to the sideline, then up, for just a second, to the press box. He couldn't see me behind the glass, but my hands still lifted, like a lighthouse light. "I'm here." He nodded, a small, private thing, to the universe or to himself or to me. First down, a quick slant. Second down, a run that yielded less than we hoped. Third down, a miracle. No, that's not right. It wasn't magic. It was practiced grace. He stepped up, slid left, threaded a pass past fingertips that wanted to tip it. The receiver hung on. Moving the chains wasn't just moving the football, it was moving hope forward. Time ticked. The clock is a drum that teaches us to value every beat. With 10 seconds left, we were at the 12-yard line. No timeouts, the crowd crackling. I looked down at my notes and realized my handwriting had become a slanted river. Caleb barked signals. You could tell he changed the play. His hands wrote new music at the line. The snap came clean. He took 3 steps, pump faked, rolled right. A linebacker peeled off a block, hungry. At the last possible breath, Caleb planted and cut inside, carving past the defender with a move that made the air shout. He lowered his shoulder at the pylon, and as he crossed it, the official's arms lifted. Touchdown. Noise erupted. The band threw itself into the fight song like an answered prayer. Strangers hugged strangers. The fireworks that always seemed a little too much felt exactly right. I was already typing something approximating a lead. Sentence for the recap. In a homecoming classic that will warm Hawthorne hearts for years, senior quarterback Caleb Archer danced a final flourish, when the extra point split the uprights and sealed it. The final seconds drained away, and the whistle ended not just the game but the fear that had been fluttering in my chest all quarter. What happened next was not choreographed. It was not media savvy or message planned. It was a human thing, an honest thing. The team surged onto the field. Players shed helmets, hugged on the run, pounded backs. I stood at the edge of this joy, a professional who knew when to document and when to just let a moment breathe. I snapped a few photos, lifted the mic toward Coach for the traditional exchange, and then, as the swell receded into celebration, I drifted toward the tunnel because that's where players funnel and that's where stories get told. He found me before the tunnel, by the concrete stanchions where paint flakes have their own history. He was still in his pads, jersey askew, black eye paint smudged by sweat. His chest rose and fell like he'd been running, though the running was done. He looked at me, not as a quarterback looks at a stat guy, not as a player glances at a staff member, but as a man looks at someone whose steadiness has become the road under his feet. "Daniel," he said, and my name felt like something beautiful being held carefully. "Caleb," I said. And where some moments need 1,000 words, this one needed 2. "You were—" "Listen," he said softly, eyes shining not just with victory but with something quieter. I'm tired of running from the right thing. I'm tired of hiding the best part of my day. There was a heartbeat then, where he waited, where he gave me room to say no, to step back, to shake my head. I didn't move. I couldn't. Not because I was frozen, but because I was rooted. He raised a hand, slow, resting it against my cheek, the roughness of his glove grazing me, then the glove falling away so his fingers could be warm. I exhaled something that had been stuck in my chest since August. And then he kissed me. It wasn't dramatic or dipped or staged like a Hollywood still. It was a careful kiss and also a sure one. A kiss given with the respect you offer a fragile, priceless thing you finally decided to stop locking away. The stadium didn't go silent. This isn't a movie. But what happened was quieter and more powerful. The noise changed. It softened, the way a thunderstorm sometimes hushes when it realizes the flowers in the garden need it gentler. People saw us. Coach saw us. The band saw us. The cheerleaders saw us. A kid on his father's shoulders saw us. And clapped because all he knows is that clapping is what you do when something good happens. I didn't pull away. My hand found his jersey at his waist, not clutching, just touching, like I was telling him, I'm here. When we parted, the world rushed back in the way a creek rushes back after a beaver moves from its dam. He laughed, a little breathless. I wanted it to be here, he said. I wanted it to be now. My heart stuttered, asked if it was allowed to be this lucky, and then settled into a new speed. Me too, I said, because I had promised myself that when this moment came, I would not make it smaller in fear. I would let it be as big as it needed to be. Coach Lacey walked over, a man whose hands were not made for handling flowers, but who could hold a bunch with tenderness if asked. That was one hell of a drive, he said to Caleb, then looked at me with eyes that had seen a lot. You too, he said. It took me a second to realize he meant something else. We're proud of you boys, he added, in a voice meant for men whose hearts might need permission to be honest. Not everyone cheered. I caught a flash of a scowl, heard the low burr of a disapproving word float over from somewhere in the stands, saw a phone lifted high, close enough I could count the smudges on its screen. But then two linemen marched over, giant men who could plant trees with their hands, and they put their arms around us both and pulled us into a huddle that was a different kind of huddle. About time, one said. We've been betting for weeks, the other said, and we all laughed, the kind of laughter that makes your shoulders drop and your jaw unclench. We walked off the field together. His hand brushed mine, then settled into it like it had a right to be there. A reporter from the local station caught up, microphone held out. Caleb, she said, careful but curious, what do you want people to know? He looked into the camera that would bring our faces into 100 living rooms in our county. He didn't grandstand. He didn't explain love like a press release. He said, we played our hearts out, and I'm proud of our team, and I'm proud of who I am. He paused, and who I love. He didn't say my name on air. He didn't have to. He squeezed my hand. That night, the town breathed us. Phones buzzed. I got texts from friends who had moved away and from professors who still remembered my final paper on sports narratives and community. My mother called, voice soft and steady. I watched, she said. Are you okay? I told her I was more than okay. I love you, she said. We'll talk to Abuela together tomorrow. We did, and Abuela, who has seen wars and weddings and everything between, laughed in that way. She laughs when she's delighted and trying not to show it too much. People kiss after games, she said. This time it was my grandson's turn. Be kind to yourselves. Eat something warm. Caleb's father called him too. I learned this later, sitting on my porch steps with him, blanket over our knees because the October air had fangs that night. His father is a good man, but a man raised with rules about what men are supposed to be. How did he take it? I asked, tentative. He was quiet, Caleb said. Then he said, "You played a good game." Then he said, "I love you. We'll talk tomorrow." He's trying, and trying counts. Caleb looked at me, his breath a visible ribbon. My mom cried the way moms cry when that's the only thing big enough to do. Happy, scared, everything. We sat like that, two grown men under a sky clean and cold. Our shoulders touched. A neighbor walking his dog waved, not in a nosy way, but in a neighbor way, the way people do when everybody's just people. The dog sniffed at our steps, decided we passed inspection, and sat down like he was there to keep a lookout from then on. "Are you worried?" I asked eventually. "About the rest of the season? Reactions? Scouts? You know." It was my job to worry about those things. It was my nature, too, but I have learned that naming worry steals some of its sting. "Yeah," he said honestly, "but I'm more worried about what hiding does to a person. I don't want to teach myself the wrong lesson just to make it easier for other people to ignore theirs." He squeezed my hand under the blanket. "I want to throw the ball like I know how, and I want to love you like I know how, and I want those to be the same kind of honest." I kissed his temple. "Okay," I said. "Then we'll be honest. We'll be steady." The next week wasn't all roses. Someone in a booth at the diner muttered loud enough that I could hear it when I stopped in for coffee. A donor emailed the athletic director a long note about tradition and values, words that can be used to lift or to flatten. But most of what happened was better than anyone could have written in advance. The student newspaper ran an editorial that was kind and clear. Alumni sent notes saying that the world had turned a little softer because of what they saw. The athletic director called me into his office, handed me a cup of black coffee, and said, "I'm glad you're here, Daniel. I'm glad he's here. We'll handle whatever comes. This is Hawthorne. We show up for people. We showed up for each other, too." In the days after, grocery runs became small parades. Older couples who grew up in a different era, stopped us by the soup aisle. "We saw you on TV," one white-haired man said, his wife tucking her hand into his elbow. "Been married 62 years. It takes work. It takes kindness. Keep your kindness." I almost cried by the tomato paste. On campus, we learned to walk together without checking over our shoulders. It wasn't a perfect walk, nothing is, but it was ours. He held my hand without theatrics. I brought him lunch to the film room sometimes, the good sandwiches from the place near the bridge that packs pickles like treasure. He came to the student radio station when I filled in for a talk show and sat in the corner, grinning as I negotiated callers who wanted to know whether we were going to run more slot receiver screens. We didn't suddenly become different people. He still woke up before dawn some mornings to do footwork drills in the field house, the kind of repetitive practice that builds the muscles you don't see. I still built my days around deadlines and the satisfying tick of a checklist. But we built a space between us where we could be softer. In that space lived simple things, the way he looked in a gray hoodie reading the news, the way I learned to love that his socks never matched on purpose, the way he learned that I like my eggs over medium, but I never liked the whites runny. We talked about the big things, too. We said the hard parts out loud. One night, in his small apartment with walls painted the color of daylight, we sat cross-legged on the rug. "I can't promise it'll always be easy," I said. "Not because of us, but because of the world." "I know," he said. "But I can promise you I'll show up, that I'll talk, that I won't make you guess what I'm thinking." "Deal," I said, and shook his hand like we were sealing a contract, our faces inches apart, our grins a mirror. We never let the world shrink our tenderness into something that had to be hidden. He kissed me in the doorway when he picked me up for dinner at my mother's, whose lasagna can make a man believe in things again. I smoothed his tie before a community fundraiser. We stopped to toss a football with a kid at the park who had a spiral that made us both clap. "He's 6, his mother said, half laughing, half worried. "What am I going to do with him?" "You're going to listen when he tells you who he is," I said, and she nodded like that was the best play she'd heard all week. The season kept going. Football doesn't pause for anyone's love story, and that's a mercy. It means your love has to learn to live in the world as it is. We played in rain and in wind that flipped umbrellas inside out. We lost once. By 3, on a kick that wobbled like a newborn foal and then decided to not be born at all. In the locker room afterward, the air salted with sweat and quiet disappointment, Caleb sat, elbows on his knees. When he looked up and found me in the doorway, his mouth twitched. "Better in next," he said, and I smiled because he'd kept his promise to those kids at the hospital and to himself. When we won, we didn't gloat. We gathered in a circle, a group of young men who had learned that the circle is a symbol for more than just a play drawn on a whiteboard. After the last home game in November, the students rushed the field and we let them. One of the linemen hoisted me up in a bear hug that left my toes inches off the turf and said, "Thanks for posting that pancake block video at half speed. My mom finally understands what I do." I told him I'd set it to classical music next time, something with strings. There were small miracles, too, of the everyday kind. A sparrow landing on the goal post during warm-ups, a pair of gloves found exactly where we lost them 2 days earlier, a text from Caleb that simply said, "Thinking of you," arriving precisely when I needed to be reminded that someone was. We navigated holidays as a we for the first time. Thanksgiving at my mother's was a warm room full of stories that have been told so many times they have grooves. My aunt winked at Caleb when he went back for seconds of sweet potatoes, and my cousin's little girl asked if he was famous. "Only in very specific zip codes," he said, making her giggle. We FaceTimed with his family after dessert. His father, true to his word, had been thinking. "You looked sharp today," he said to Caleb. Then he looked at me through the screen and said, "I like the way you listen." Sometimes acceptance sounds like something simple. Sometimes, a year later, it sounds like his father pressing a hand to my shoulder when we take a family photo at graduation, guiding me in like I belong, which I do. After the season wrapped, awards came, all conference, a watch list for something named after a man from decades ago, a small scholarship in my name for communications students who write about sports with heart. We celebrated by doing ordinary things, buying a Christmas tree that was a little too tall and trimming it so it would stand straight, learning how to make bizcochitos from my grandmother's recipe, watching a movie that made him cry, then me, then both of us together. A pile of tissues between us we no longer pretended we weren't using. An email arrived inviting him to a regional showcase for players hoping to catch the eye of professional scouts. He paced our kitchen while he read it, then handed me his phone like it was something fragile but joyful. "I'm going to go," he said. "I'm going to see." "You go," I said, already calculating time off and cheap flights, and whether I could convince the athletic department to let me write a human interest piece about the process. "I'll be there," I added, and he nodded, a long nod that meant he didn't doubt it, but he liked to hear it anyway. We traveled in January, the cold, the kind that makes your teeth think twice. In a cavernous field house, the world distilled itself to stopwatches and clipboards, bodies in motion, the squeak of cleats on polished rubber. He ran his routes with determination and with joy, because how you do something matters even when, and perhaps especially when, you're being watched. Some scouts looked at us and saw the kiss, months old, maybe replayed once in a clip packaged with string music on local TV. Some looked and saw a young man who read defenses like sheet music. I suspect the best ones saw both, because both are the truth. On the last day, I waited by the sideline with coffee I had walked 3 blocks in sleet to get. He jogged over, cheeks bright with cold and effort. "I did what I can do," he said. "You did," I agreed. "I don't know what happens next," he said, and there wasn't sadness in it so much as openness. "We'll find out," I said, "and whatever it is, we'll stand in it together." In the end, there was interest, but not the kind that writes your name in big letters on a scoreboard. A camp invite here, a hopeful promise there. He went to one, loved the speed, loved the scope, loved the fact that people dedicated their lives to chasing a ball because it's not silly to care about things that make you feel alive. He also loved coming home, to our town that had learned the shape of us. He sat me down at our table in March, the light pouring in like we had left the window open for it. "I think I want to coach," he said. "I think I want to help boys learn to be men who know how to be boys still when it's good for them. I think I want to stay. I wanted to be sure it wasn't fear. You don't have to choose smaller because we made something brave happen in a small place, I said. He took my hand. This doesn't feel smaller, he said. It feels right-sized. It feels like the next right thing. So in August, while I was promoted to Assistant Director of Communications with a desk plant that I swore to keep alive, he began as a graduate assistant coach, learning how to build practice plans and how to make sure the last second-string player knew he mattered as much as anyone under the lights. Sometimes we carpooled. Sometimes I'd look out over the field at dusk and see him teaching footwork, his voice carrying across the grass like a song. He had become the kind of man my abuela would pray for me to find, decent, present, a person whose everyday actions matched his big moments. In the late heat of August, when the cicadas wrote their own percussion, I'd walk the track while practice wound down and watch Caleb teach footwork to a kid from a town smaller than ours. He coached like he played, patient, precise, generous. He used words like balance and breath, and the boys listened because he respected them. Some evenings he'd catch me hovering by the gate, wave me over, and introduce me as if I were woven into the fabric of the team. "This is Daniel," he'd say. "He tells the truth about who we are." That small sentence fit like armor. One freshman quarterback, thin as a flagpole and twice as earnest, hung back after drills. I watched Caleb take off his cap, run a hand through his hair, and stand shoulder to shoulder with the kid so they were both looking downfield together. "You don't have to be loud to be sure," he told him. "Just put the ball where your courage points." Later, I asked what the kid had said. "He asked if people like us really belong in football," Caleb answered, eyes soft. "I told him people like us belong anywhere we're willing to be kind and work." In September, his parents drove down in a sedan that had hauled him to 100 practices. They brought a cooler of peaches and a box of old family photos. We ate on our porch, juice running down our wrists, and his father pulled out a picture of 4-year-old Caleb asleep on a football, small hands curved around it like a planet. He slid the photo across to me as if he was sliding permission. "He's always held on," his dad said. "I'm learning what that means now." He met my eyes, steady. "Thank you for taking good care of what he holds. Not every day felt like a postcard." At an away game that October, a few voices from the stands tried to make their smallness sound large. They barked names that weren't ours, tried to bait. Our players tightened their huddle. The band started Lean on Me without being asked. I stood on the sideline, headset humming, and watched our line protect the pocket like a family guarding its table. Afterward, a grandmother in the other team's colors reached for my hand in the concourse. "My grandson plays here," she said. "I hope he grows up in a world like yours." In late November, when the last home lights went dark for winter, we walked the perimeter of the field, our breath making lanterns. Caleb kicked at a stray pylon, then leaned on the rail where the tunnel begins. "I still think about that night," he said, voice dipping with memory. "Not the cameras. The feeling of choosing." I threaded my fingers through his. "We keep choosing," I said. "Not for an audience. For the life we're building." He kissed my forehead, the quiet kind of kiss you give when you're already home. The bleachers creaked like they agreed. Winter settled in like an old dog, heavy, loyal, a little stubborn. We shoveled neighbors' steps, swapped soup recipes, learned where the grocery store hides the good citrus. On Saturdays, we hosted movie nights for anyone on the team who needed a couch and a bowl of chili and a place to set down their bravado. I'd watch Caleb listen to a homesick lineman talk about his little sister's piano recital, and I'd feel the same awe I felt watching him thread a needle between defenders. It was all the same skill, attention, translated into care. In March, my abuela came to town with a tin of cookies and a plan. She asked Caleb to carry her bag like it weighed more than a cloud, then sat us at my kitchen table and said a blessing that was mostly gratitude and a little mischief. "Love makes a house less drafty," she said, tapping the table. "And boys, remember, walls keep out cold, but windows let in light." "Build both?" Caleb kissed her cheek. "Yes, ma'am." Later, she pressed a small silver medal into his palm. "For steady hands," she said. "He wears it tucked under his shirts during games he coaches." When spring remembered us, the river let go of its ice with a sigh. Caleb organized a kids' camp on the practice fields. T-shirts too big and grins bigger. Parents lined the fence. I ran the registration table, penned name tags, and passed out orange slices. In the afternoon, a boy with a rainbow bracelet missed 3 throws and swiped at his eyes. Caleb trotted over, set the cones closer, and whispered something that made the boy square his shoulders. The next throw found his friend's chest, and the two of them laughed like they were allowed to belong, because they were. That evening, after the last cone was stacked and the field was a green quiet, he asked if I wanted to take a walk. We drifted toward the tunnel the way geese find the river, by habit and by hope. The lights were on, even though no one needed them, painting everything stadium silver. You know, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, I've been thinking about the right words for the right promise. He stopped where paint flakes peel and turned to me, eyes steady. I want to make ours official. I didn't hear a marching band or fireworks. I heard my heartbeat and soft crickets. He reached in his pocket and pulled out a ring, not flashy but honest, a simple band with a faint etching of a compass inside. For steady, he said, smiling a little. For finding home, even on away games. My yes came out as a laugh and a tear at the same time. He slid it on. It fit like a truth. We kissed, there by the tunnel under those familiar lights, the same place he chose me once, choosing me again. We didn't run. We belonged there.